Upon discovering Tom's infidelity just as I was preparing to gather evidence, Susan swiftly moved into our home. With resolve, I announced, "I'm moving in with my lover, so it's time for you to leave. We'll handle the mortgage, though it's costly. I'm not overly concerned. My income has substantially increased since the past few years. I can manage it easily." Tom looked surprised, and he shot back, "Oh, is that so? I guess it puts an end to it. You should be more respectful toward me. You've had a luxurious life in this chic home thanks to our marriage. Still, you give me commands and confront me all the time." His finger was pointing accusingly at me. "I no longer require your help. Never show your face here once more," he angrily proclaimed. I sighed in resignation and said, "Then I'll leave, even though the mortgage is $4,000 a month." I became resentful when I thought back on the years of hardship and sleep deprivation I had endured while Tom had an affair with a younger woman. I'm a 47-year-old housewife named Linda. 10 years have passed since I married Tom following my graduation from college. I started off as an office worker for a small company, but motivated by a desire to follow my passions, I dove into web design and got a job with Tom's company. Tom was well liked and respected by coworkers as well as superiors for his abilities. I had feelings for him, too. He invited me out for a meal, and before I knew it, we were dating. At over 35, deeply engrossed in my work, I had resigned myself to being single, so I was elated to find companionship with Tom. We both agreed on remaining child-free and shared similar values, so marriage felt like the natural next step. Transitioning to freelancing after marriage, I began working from home, grateful for Tom's support, especially his efforts in connecting me with his clients at Tom's behest. We invested in land near a station and commissioned a major construction company to build our dream home. Although apprehensive about the hefty monthly mortgage, Tom was adamant about realizing his vision. Despite my initial concerns, the completed house exuded comfort, and our days together were tranquil. However, as time passed, Tom's true financial habits emerged. He displayed a careless attitude towards money, evident in our shopping trips where he indiscriminately added items to the basket, expecting me to foot the bill. "Domestic beef is on sale. Linda, let's grill it tonight. Tomorrow, we'll enjoy braised yellowtail and root vegetable stew. Oh, and sushi is discounted too. How about adding some premium whiskey and sweet potato shochu to the cart?" His tendency to exceed our budget became a recurring issue. Despite my efforts to manage our finances prudently, Tom insisted on accompanying me to the supermarket every time, making impulsive purchases along the way. Every weekend, the cycle of overspending resulted in more than $100 in additional expenses. "Tom, you should take responsibility for what you buy," I insisted. His response was dismissive, tossing the money and receipt onto the desk. "Here you go. You're such a miser. With your decent earnings, you could at least cover this much," I retorted, frustrated by his lack of accountability. "I do earn a fair amount because of my full-time job, but it's exasperating to be spoken to like this," he countered. "As a housewife, managing these matters better should be part of your responsibilities, shouldn't it?" he lectured, sighing deeply. "And $500 a month for pocket money is too little. I need more." When I objected, Tom seemed annoyed. "Even $1,000 isn't sufficient. Think about it. It's odd for a husband to earn less than his wife," he declared. "If I earn more than you won't be able to challenge me so defiantly." His words left me dumbfounded. "Are you planning to work even harder than you already do? You hardly contribute to household chores as it is," I countered, stunned by his arrogance. "You should pitch in more, considering you're at home all day." Tom's response was unexpected. "Understood. If you're dissatisfied with your allowance, let's keep our finances separate," he suggested, seemingly intrigued. "We'll each contribute a fixed amount from our salaries to a joint account for savings. The remainder will cover living expenses, the mortgage, and taxes according to our incomes. So, you'll decide your own allowance." Agreeing to the arrangement, Tom never complained about his allowance again. He ceased accompanying me on shopping trips, and the issue of overspending on groceries was finally resolved. Another source of trouble was my mother-in-law. Since my father-in-law's passing a decade ago, Tom, as the only son, had been caring for her. I harbored anxiety about the possibility of Tom's mother moving in with us when we got married, but thankfully, that scenario didn't materialize. According to Tom, his mother preferred living alone, yet she frequently summoned him for minor tasks. "Tom, I need you to change the light bulb in the bathroom," she'd call. "My computer froze. Can you come over?" or Abby got into the house, help me. Her requests ranged from mundane to trivial, but Tom dutifully attended to each one. Despite her kindness towards me and her lack of unannounced visits, she remained deeply attached to Tom. Furthermore, Tom made a solemn vow to spend Mother's Day and her birthday with her every year, a promise he faithfully upheld. Each time he departed, I silently bid him farewell, resigning myself to the fact that he was a devoted mama's boy. Although I could tolerate this, the real challenge arose when Tom began drawing comparisons between me and his mother. Recently, his behavior had become more irksome. On weekdays, he returned home late, sometimes past midnight. On weekends, he either engaged in work-related socializing or lounged on the sofa, engrossed in his phone. Despite his pre-marriage pledge to share household chores, he now cited work as an excuse, neglecting his responsibilities entirely. When he did eventually stir from his stupor, he'd often complain about the meals. I hate miso soup, he'd grumble, why do you serve it every morning? Or, I feel like a caterpillar when I see leafy vegetables, they're disgusting. His criticisms extended to the potato salad, which he deemed dry and unappetizing. I was in the mood for something with a soy sauce taste tonight. He'd remark, why did you make salted fried chicken stew? It's a lazy meal. And inevitably, he'd conclude with, my mom used to put more effort into making delicious meals. Besides the main dish, I want at least 3. Exasperated, I'd remind him I'm not a housekeeper, I'm also working. However, Tom remained obstinate, speaking in a condescending tone that grated on my nerves. Recently, his demands had escalated. I'll be sending money to my mom with my bonus, so take care of it, he informed me casually one day. Taken aback, I inquired, is your mother facing financial difficulties? Tom explained that she often complained of not having enough money for outings or theater trips with her friends. Sympathetic, he had resolved to assist her financially on a monthly basis. I recalled that Tom's mother had a penchant for traveling. As a pensioner and housewife, I believed she should practice moderation. Linda, please handle more work. If you increase your workload, you can cover my bonus portion without any trouble, Tom declared proudly. His suggestion infuriated me. Why should I work harder for your mother to enjoy herself? I wanted to retort, but I held my tongue. Pushing myself further was already challenging. I was sacrificing sleep to meet deadlines, a routine that included regular overtime. We don't have children, so your workload is lighter. Don't complain, I reminded him. But Tom, you only work, while I also manage the household chores, I countered. Ah, I see, then let's bring my mom here, if she lives with us. We won't need to increase our living expenses, Tom proposed resignedly. With a resigned sigh, I agreed to increase my workload to cover the bonus, albeit begrudgingly. Okay, as long as you understand, I conceded. Thanks, Tom smirked, aggravating my irritation further. Here's the lunchbox, wash it, he added, handing me the bag before heading upstairs. Reluctantly, I opened the bag, only to find another cute pink memo inside. Thank you for always making the loving wife's lunchbox. Today's score is 80, Tom had written. His critique included complaints about the chewiness of the fried chicken and the sweetness of the omelet. When I confronted him about the memo, Tom became flustered. It's from a female subordinate. She's concerned about my health and gives me various tips, he explained. Then why don't you have her make it from now on? I suggested, feeling frustrated. Making lunch is a wife's job, Tom pouted in response. You're quite flustered, aren't you? Are you jealous? He accused. At your age, it's shameful for an old lady to be so jealous. His words stung, and I couldn't help but point out his affair. Since then, Tom's demeanor had noticeably cooled, but his harsh words continued to echo in my ears, haunting me even as I tried to sleep. Each time they returned, I found myself drenched in tears, my pillow bearing the weight of my sorrow. It's only natural for a wife to desire her husband's well-groomed appearance. However, the agony of meticulously preparing a lunchbox, considering every aspect from color to nutritional balance, only to have it scornfully judged by someone like Tom, who likely couldn't even boil water, was unbearable. After some time, a message arrived from Tom, who had been away on a business trip, seemingly liberated from my constant reminders to finish tasks promptly and instead seeking enjoyment. Let's wrap up work quickly and have some fun, he urged, anticipating a rendezvous at the hot spring. Looking forward to being with you, love you. When I stood frozen, clutching my phone, the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. Tom was cheating. The notes left in the lunchbox were likely from his other woman. My love for Tom had evaporated, replaced by a simmering resentment at his betrayal. Upon Tom's return, I confronted him, presenting the damning evidence on my phone. He confessed easily, his anger palpable despite his infidelity. "I'm tired of a suffocating woman like you. Give me some freedom, will you?" His words left me stunned, as if I were the one at fault. Days passed with icy silence between us. One Sunday afternoon, when I was immersed in a book, the silence was broken by the sound of the doorbell. A moving company's voice announced their coming over the intercom. Unfazed, Tom hurried to reply, expressing gratitude and providing guidance. Tom's tone was sugar-coated when he apologized for oversleeping and being late as they got to work. Susan, a young woman, appeared, her presence obvious. Tom said, "Good morning, Susan," with a familiar warmth. "You continue to be adorable." She was the one Tom had been texting. That much was certain. I was shocked by their blatant show of passion as they openly flirted and entwined their arms. Tom and Susan came up to me, holding hands, and grinning at my incredulity as Susan told the movers to move everything inside. "You still don't get it," he reprimanded. "This is why I can't tolerate stupidity." He sighed heavily and declared, and Susan followed, "My lover and I are moving in together, so leave now, we will handle the mortgage." When I watched the boxes being brought in, I blinked and became vaguely aware of their objectives. They really did have plans to kick me out. "I don't mind, but you do realize the mortgage is quite hefty, right?" I said something in response. "You just don't understand, do you?" Tom confidently shot back, "My yearly revenue has increased dramatically from a few years ago. I can manage the mortgage with ease." "Oh, is that so?" I answered calmly. "I guess it puts an end to it, but remember, I was the only one who could have made you even remotely autonomous. I got you a few clients, but they hardly made ends meet. If not, you would have given up long ago." "To a certain measure, I appreciate that," I firmly said. Tom became arrogant in his tone, pointing a finger at me. He said, "My own skills are the reason I am getting continuous work now. In essence, you ought to treat me with more dignity. You've been able to live so nicely in this chic home every day because I married you. Nevertheless, you dare to lecture me and interrupt me constantly in answer." I shrugged my shoulders. "Then I'll leave, though the mortgage is $4,000 a month." Anger shot through me as I stuffed necessities into a trunk. I wanted to shout. He was enamored with a younger mistress, while I dutifully took care of the chores and worked non-stop, leaving no time for sleep. He was going to pay a price for betraying me. I didn't hesitate to go immediately to a real estate agent and get the house and land deed transferred into Tom's name, while Susan and Tom were at work. I went back to the house after finding a rented apartment. I had movers bring my stuff into my room after I packed it. Lily seemed to take it personally when I told her about the issue. It was as though she had bit into a bitter insect. "When you were building the house, your income was higher than Tom's, right?" she asked. "Yes, it was," I replied. "It had to be put in my name because the mortgage wouldn't have been approved otherwise." Lily gave a knowing nod. "Tom doesn't seem to grasp that passing the mortgage assessment as a freelancer requires a stable income and a good reputation." "Exactly," I replied. "Anyone who did a little research would realize how highly regarded you are in the industry." Lily took a sip of her tea and conveyed her disbelief. "Is Tom's salary higher than yours now?" "Who knows?" I answered back. "Even so, he gives money away as soon as his mother asks for it. $4,000 a month will probably be difficult." "That's true," Lily said with a laugh and a head shake, "since it's deducted from your account. Maybe he forgot how much is being paid monthly." With a, "I think so," I said. "He's always been careless with money." I went on. "What will he do if he can't pay the mortgage after it's in his name?" As we were eating cake, "Will an auction be held for it?" Lily let out a sorrowful sigh. "Yeah. Sadly, however, there is nothing that can be done about it." It was obvious how disappointed she was. "I take it Tom is capable at his job." "He is, after all, one of our clients. He is not only loved by the female staff members, but he is also well respected by his male subordinates and employers." I reflected. "He was nice when we were dating. He supported my work too." "Are you suggesting discussing divorce proceedings now?" I said, resting my cheek on my hand. "Yes, it seems like the right time," Lily said gravely. "I'll get legal counsel and begin alimony discussions. Additionally, I must look into Susan, the salesperson." It was astute of her to catch my eye right before that. "Be cautious." "All right." After saying thanks to Lily for the interesting talk, I returned to my apartment. A week later, I was looking over the pictures that the detective agency had sent of Susan when I got a call from an unknown number. I responded out of curiosity to discover Susan on the line. She begged, "Could you do something about Tom? He heads to work with disheveled hair, skips shaving, and even finds washing his face too bothersome." I couldn't resist chuckling quietly. "That's all Tom has to say. He won't move unless you badger him nonstop." Susan was silent for a minute before muttering, "He even resists basic hygiene." I told Susan that I had watched great care of Tom's appearance, from ironing his shirts to giving him breath fresheners. "I suspected as much," I said in response. Susan's voice trailed off into amazement. "Do I really need to spell out these things to an adult?" "Well, if you're not fond of it, why not call it quits?" I recommended. Susan shot back, "I won't fall for that ploy. A house and yard and an attractive, well-paid man are quite the find. Just wait, Tom, I'll change you. Good luck with that." I made a joke. "Oh, and I'll be over here tomorrow. I have a conversation I need to have with you and Tom." "You're not welcome," Susan retorted aggressively. "Are you trying to convince me to divorce him?" I said. "We'll talk about that tomorrow," and Susan grudgingly agreed. The following day, when I got to their house, Tom was quite unhappy. "I have a lot on my plate. Let's get this done quickly," he replied brusquely. I looked at the wall-mounted calendar and gave a knowing nod. "Today's your birthday, isn't it, Tom?" "That's accurate," Tom urged. "Please leave as soon as you're done with your business. It's an important day." Glancing from Susan to Tom, I had to question myself. "Haven't you told her yet?" Tom appeared uneasy. "I was planning to tell her later." Susan looked from us to each other. "What's going on?" I smiled brightly and stepped in. "I take it that you two are heading out to dinner. You have reservations, right?" "Yes, at the Italian place near the station," I interrupted. Tom looked annoyed. "Can you just be quiet for a moment?" Susan lost her temper. "It's your mother-in-law's favorite place, right?" I remarked casually, watching Susan's puzzled expression. It seemed Tom hadn't divulged this detail to her. Suppressing a laugh, I proceeded to spill the beans to Susan. "Every year on his birthday, Tom has dinner with his mother. He cancels all other plans and spends the night with her until the next morning." Susan's mouth dropped open in shock as the realization dawned on her. "And it's the same for his mother's birthday, Mother's Day, and Christmas." "Susan, you must have noticed, right?" I continued, laying out photos on the dining table. Upon seeing the photos, Susan's expression twisted into a grimace. "Unbelievable. Don't make that face. Birthdays are to thank my mother for giving birth to me." Tom blushed, defending his actions. The photos showed Tom walking closely with his mother, smiling warmly. Tom glared at Susan, his tone turning harsh. "Each of these days is a cherished memory for me and my mom. Valuing one's parents is a good thing, isn't it?" "I get that, but shopping arm in arm, taking cheek-to-cheek photos, and having candlelit romantic dinners with your mother is a bit much, don't you think?" Susan shot back, her tone getting louder. Susan's voice became as high as a scream when she stared down at the pictures. Seeing Tom's mother, who looked young for her age, made the scenes look more like dates with an older woman rather than mother-son outings. "Is dating my mother wrong? She's been lonely since Dad died and wants me to be around. I have to do everything in my power to make her happy," Tom said sincerely. "Well, he did say dating," I thought to myself, trying not to chuckle. Susan tried to talk to Tom while her eyes filled with tears. "So, it's always been like this, getting stood up for mother's priorities, even after booking nice restaurants for Tom's birthday or Christmas," Susan said. Tom readily acknowledged it. "Who's more important to you, me or your mother?" Susan made a demand. "My mother, naturally," Tom retorted icily. "I thought you were amazing, nice, professional, and cool, but you're really a sloppy mama's boy. What a letdown. So why don't you call it quits?" Susan bragged. "I don't need him anymore either." Susan drooped her shoulders, and I couldn't help but laugh and mock her. I said jokingly, "Oh, and he gives his mom $5,000 from his bonus, aside from gifts for anniversaries." Susan's shocked eyes grew wider. "What? Does he pay her $10,000 annually?" "Yes, it is correct. It's absurd. There won't be as much for me," I said, observing Susan quickly cover her mouth in a pallid manner. I took advantage of the situation and arranged pictures of Susan on the table from a big envelope. "You know I hate gambling, right?" I said, as it had been out that Susan often went to casinos on her days off. Tom's expression changed considerably as he browsed through the pictures. "Slots, horse racing, boat racing, you're into every kind of gambling." I thought, whatever, it's how I get rid of tension. I'm not trying to interfere with your own enjoyment, but overindulging to the point of debt is not recommended, I said. My comments caused Susan's cheeks to tighten up. She insisted, why do you even know about that? Did you not urge Tom to purchase those name-brand goods, which you subsequently sold at flea markets to offset debts? Actually, you do frequently misplace the purses and accessories I get you. With a sardonic smirk, I said, don't tell me you've actually been selling them, when I validated her concerns. Susan broke out in a cold sweat. Oh, that makes sense. Your coworker's conversation was overheard by my friend Lily. Susan, who is spoiled by her lover, has been selling name-brand stuff to offset her debt, I continued, noticing Susan give me a bitter stare. You shouldn't share such things with colleagues. It spreads through the office like wildfire, I said. I think I found a good cash cow, mama's boy, giving her some advice. I'm happier without you here. I can quickly find someone else because I'm cute. I'll go right ahead and find another dude. With that, Susan snatched up her bag and jacket and stormed out of the house. Susan, the alimony bill will be arriving later. Make sure you pay it, I said as she turned to retreat. Tom reluctantly consented to the divorce when I used a lawyer to demand alimony. I was able to get a few more clients and increase my savings a few months ago after getting a full transfer to my account. I was thinking about buying a condo when I got a disturbing call from Tom. He sobbed over the phone. What's this about a $4,000 monthly mortgage? Anticipating his call, I thought back to our earlier conversations in which you were involved, but I was unable to remember the details. Did the numbers not get stressed at home and at the bank? You were keeping me in the dark. Showing greater engagement, I forced myself to calm down and gave a clear explanation. I had planned to pay $1,000 a month, but your demands for ostentatious extras increased the price. You desired a house full of distinctive luxury, but I recommended sensible upgrades like a solarium or pantry. Despite my contributions, you brag about how special our home is. I carried on the talk, enumerating my wishes for a convenient location, a soundproof music room, and a custom-made study, while emphasizing the unavoidable expense of these luxuries. Yes, Tom, I could have afforded it at the time, but things change. I wasn't comfortable with your casual reply. You're saying you can't afford the $4,000 mortgage with your current income. Tom stopped talking when the momentum dipped. He finally suggested moving in with his mother to split living expenses as a solution. Considering his recent separation with Susan and his plan to sell the furnishings, it was an unexpected turn of events. Reflecting on his offer, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of disbelief and appreciation. That's nice of you, I responded, pondering the unexpected twist in our conversation. If I can't keep up with the mortgage payments, the house will likely go into foreclosure. Even if we sell it, we'd still be left with the outstanding mortgage. How do I break this news to Mom? Tell her the truth, you say. What about renovating the in-law house and living there together? But the funds for renovations are non-existent, aren't they? That's impossible. Tom quickly rebuffed the idea, revealing a truth that had been kept hidden. His wife, with her higher income, had been the one paying the mortgage. Now, faced with the reality of divorce due to his affair, the prospect of losing the house was looming embarrassingly. Tom's outburst, justifying his infidelity as commonplace, left me speechless with disbelief. Refusing to entertain the idea of returning to that house, I asserted my plans to move into a high-rise condo. Tom's derision at the notion, implying my financial inability as a mere freelance web designer, only fueled my resolve. Cutting off communication with him, I chose to handle matters through legal channels. However, the saga continued when I received a desperate call from Linda, my mother-in-law, pleading for help. Despite our estrangement, she appealed to our familial ties, emphasizing my decent income and the need to pay off the house's mortgage. Suppressing my rising disgust, I explained our status as divorced strangers, unwilling to bear responsibility for Tom's actions. Her insistence and attempts to guilt-trip me were met with firm refusal. I refused to be swayed by emotional manipulation, understanding that the responsibility for the house lay with its occupant. In a fit of anger, Linda hurled insults, blaming my supposed shortcomings for Tom's infidelity. Dismissing her accusations, I stood my ground. The conversation ended with her hanging up, leaving behind a bitter exchange. Despite the turmoil, I remained resolute in my decision. Unwilling to be dragged into the chaos of their affairs, I promptly blocked my mother-in-law's number, putting an end to her pleas. Sometime later, Lily shared an astonishing tale. Susan, post-breakup with Tom, was apprehended attempting to pilfer from the company's safe, resulting in her arrest. It seemed her gambling debts had spiraled out of control, leaving her in a state of utter desperation. Susan's once radiant appearance had faded, as depicted in the haggard images circulated in online news. Predictably, Tom's mortgage application faltered, leading to the foreclosure of the house. Although it sold at auction, Tom remained burdened with the remaining mortgage, residing in his parents' home while grappling with ongoing payments adding to his woes. Susan falsely accused him of coercion during her theft ordeal, subjecting Tom to questioning and subsequent loss of credibility at his workplace. Uncomfortable alongside Susan, who received probation, Tom chose to resign voluntarily. Subsequently, Tom juggled multiple part-time jobs to meet mortgage obligations. Yet his mother persisted in squandering his earnings extravagantly. Despite his efforts to reason with her, their disagreements often escalated into noisy confrontations, disturbing the peace of their neighbors. Meanwhile, having realized my dream of moving into a high-rise condo, I found solace in the comfort of living alone. Unlike the previous home, burdened with Tom's extravagant desires, I selected a place that aligned with my own preferences. Despite the demands of work, I found contentment in spending my earnings solely on myself. A modest happiness I held dear. Still feeling the need for growth, I resolved to continue refining my skills and expanding my design capabilities, eager to embrace the opportunities that lay ahead. That's all about the first story, and now let's watch another similar story. I find myself in a peculiar situation, pregnant with the president's child. Could you please expedite our divorce proceedings, my dear? The woman who brazenly referred to me as an old lady stands before me, a mere 22-year-old fresh out of college, deliberately entwining herself in my husband's embrace. She casts a smirk my way, leaving me with nothing but a resigned sigh. My husband, once claiming to be consumed by work and dedication, scarcely graces our home with his presence, preferring to gallivant about town. Little did I realize, his absences weren't solely for the sake of his professional duties, but rather for clandestine rendezvous with other women. I felt a pang of sympathy for our employees as I remained silent, while the woman before me wore a smug grin. Quite the shock, isn't it, losing a millionaire husband to someone like me, she taunted, but you needn't blame yourself. The glaring age difference between us made it an easy choice for him. Her incessant jabs about my age stoked a fire of fury within me, but something else captured my attention. $1 million a year, she boasted confidently, oblivious to the truth. Glancing at my husband, I observed his complexion pale noticeably. I could almost picture the falsehoods he'd spun for her. With the sweetest of smiles, I corrected her misconception. Actually, my dear, I am Megan, 50 years young. My husband David and I, of the same age, met through a mutual friend and built our company from the ground up. Despite the challenges, we supported each other, and our business flourished. While we may not have children, our lives are rich with fulfillment. Recently, however, our relationship has waned. Though aging is natural and brings its share of fatigue and aches, my husband's apparent lethargy upon returning home is disheartening. Gone is the dedication he once showed to our company, replaced instead by evenings spent lounging on the sofa, eyes glued to the television. It's a reality that leaves me questioning the sincerity of his efforts and the depth of his commitment. When my husband returns home, he's quick to launch into a litany of complaints about his various pains, expecting my undivided attention as if I work less than he does. "Hey, beer," he calls out, signaling the start of his routine. "Get it yourself, I'm preparing materials for tomorrow's meeting." Exaggerated sighs accompany his movements as he flings open the fridge. Does someone not know how to care for her husband? He quips, a wife should support her husband. If only you were a bit more charming like in the early days of our marriage. In those days, we indulged in lavish dinners and romantic dates, believing our happiness to be eternal. But now, he brings work home, boasting about his importance and how indispensable he is to the company. It's as if he's compensating for his incompetence by overloading himself with tasks he can't finish. His complaints grate on my nerves, and he retires to bed early, living life on his own terms. Lately, it's become apparent that his dedication to work is mere lip service. Despite his claims of caring deeply for the company, his behavior towards his subordinates reeks of arrogance. He delegates tasks based on personal preference rather than merit, leaving the staff feeling powerless to voice their concerns even if I wanted to address these issues. Who would listen? My husband, the company president, brushes off any suggestion of trouble within the organization as someone else's problem. I never intended to bring work home, but it seems the only time my husband is willing to engage in conversation is after dinner. As I tidy up, have you been too hard on your subordinates lately? I cautiously broach the subject with David. His response is dismissive, eyes glued to the TV. What are you talking about? I'm just trying to contribute to the company's success, he retorts defensively. His mention of a new venture catches me off guard. A new venture? I haven't heard anything about it. I press further, unfazed. He explains that he's taking action because others aren't pulling their weight. I'm not dumping my work on them, I'm asking for their help, he insists, his gaze fixed elsewhere, leaving me to ponder the growing unrest within the company. And then you accuse me of having a bad attitude towards my subordinates, of dumping my work on them, I retorted, frustration creeping into my voice. It's infuriating to hear such complaints from someone who claims to care about the company. He seemed visibly upset by being called out. What you're doing is just shifting your responsibilities onto them, I continued, pressing the issue. Do you honestly think your subordinates can simply refuse your requests? Are you stepping in to alleviate their workload or provide any assistance? Because from where I stand, they're being overloaded with work. Yeah, I get it, you're such a nag, he snapped, annoyance evident in his tone as he stormed off to his room. My irritation, as well as that of the employees, only intensified towards my husband, who showed up at the company without truly contributing anything substantial. Despite my attempts to address the issue at the office, he would only work earnestly for a brief period before returning to distractions like his phone, not taking his responsibilities seriously. The employees surely had grievances, but they remained silent, hindered by my role as his wife. Desperate to make him see reason and support his subordinates, I cautioned him repeatedly. However, he showed no signs of taking me seriously or intending to improve. We had pledged to steer the company's direction together, yet these new ventures he kept mentioning were completely unfamiliar to me. While the company's performance faltered, he continued to meddle independently. Disregarding my advice, he dismissed my concerns about launching new ventures without considering financial implications, brushing off my input with a curt, "Don't interfere with what I'm doing for the future." Lately, he'd been returning home later, citing meetings with clients, which seemed suspiciously frequent. When pressed for details, he'd grumble about future opportunities and important clients, sidestepping any specifics. His expenses on these outings, often with women, raised more questions than answers. One day, while out on sales visits, I spotted him at a cafe, purportedly working on documents, but with him, you never knew, he was likely using it as an excuse to slack off from work, which was frustrating. When I approached the cafe with the intention of speaking to him, I noticed another figure at his window-side table. Upon closer inspection, it became apparent that he was sharing the table with a young woman whom I didn't recognize. She certainly wasn't one of our employees or associated with any company we dealt with. Who could she be meeting with during work hours? And at such a time, I found myself pondering if she could be the client my husband had mentioned. However, she didn't strike me as someone who frequented nightclubs, and I questioned whether someone of her age could handle such a business deal. However, I quickly admonished myself for judging her capabilities based on appearance or age. Perhaps I had been too harsh on my husband lately, suspecting even his legitimate business meetings of being affairs. Due to my dwindling trust in him, it occurred to me that my husband might genuinely be attempting to change the company in his own way. It was time for a serious conversation with him. Perhaps my recent attitude had made it difficult for him to consult with me in the past. Leaving the scene, I headed to the next sales office. Upon returning home, I joined my husband for dinner. I noticed you were out today. Was it about the new business venture? I inquired casually. Well, something like that, he replied nonchalantly. I saw you at a cafe at noon. Was that woman a client? Were you spying on me? His tone grew noticeably irritated as he stopped eating. Spying? What are you talking about? I just thought I should greet her if she was a client. Is she scheduled to visit our office? Or is there something guilty that needs spying? I retorted, meeting his glare head-on. Guilty of what? That girl was someone I was interviewing to involve in the new venture, he explained defensively. I wasn't aware of this. It came as quite a surprise. I don't feel obligated to report every detail to you. Is she an employee or a part-timer? What terms of employment have you discussed with her? Why do I need to explain all of this? If you have concerns, feel free to hold on to them. I don't have time for these fruitless discussions. Hiring decisions shouldn't be made unilaterally. We already have enough staff. And we've collectively agreed not to hire new personnel this year due to budget constraints. Reversing that decision on your own implies she must be quite extraordinary, right? Can you at least tell me who she is and where she's from? He rose from his chair, visibly agitated, refusing to acknowledge me. Are you implying an affair? I finally vocalized my long-standing suspicion, but he remained silent, retreating to his room a few days later. During a morning meeting, my husband announced that someone was interested in visiting the company. When he opened the door with a wide smile, there stood the young woman I had seen at the cafe. This is a young lady who recently graduated from university. Please, everyone, treat her well, he said, addressing the employees with a smile. Glancing around, the employees seemed puzzled, some shooting me looks, perhaps assuming I was aware of her visit. I, for one, had no knowledge of any visit, let alone an impromptu company tour. Approaching my husband and the woman, I asked, "Your name is Ashley?" "Yes, Ashley. Thank you for having me," she replied, offering a polite smile. Due to a lack of communication with the staff, we weren't prepared for your visit today. Could we possibly reschedule? I apologize for the suddenness. I'm sorry for coming unannounced, Ashley said, her tone apologetic, clutching the hem of my husband's suit as if she had committed a grave error. After sending Ashley away with a reassuring word, my husband returned to his desk, visibly displeased. Can we talk for a moment? I called him into the meeting room to address the situation. Bringing someone in for a visit without consulting anyone is problematic. What were you thinking? I pressed, frustration evident in my tone. And what's with you being so friendly with Ash and then lecturing me? It's just a company visit. There's no need to make a fuss, he replied dismissively. And what if she discusses what she saw here with someone else? We have a lot of sensitive client information. If there's going to be a visit, we can make arrangements to ensure sensitive information isn't exposed and have someone guide her, I countered, exasperated by his lack of crisis management. Despite my efforts to convey the seriousness of the situation, he remained unfazed, casually exiting the meeting room. Observing his familiar tone with Ash and the offense she seemed to take, I couldn't shake off the suspicion of an affair between them. When I asked my husband about Ashley, who had just visited the company, he replied that she had recently graduated from university but gave no other information, dismissing my concerns and telling me to forget about it. Oddly, after Ashley's visit, conversations about the new project likewise came to an abrupt stop. He seemed less interested in the firm now that things were going well with Ashley, and it looked like the reason he was seeing her might have been just an excuse to meet her. If the purpose of his bringing her to the workplace was just to meet outside, I couldn't understand. A casual sales call would have done. No need to invent reasons about new projects. To top it off, introducing her to the staff had revealed Ashley to everyone, which made me even more suspicious of my husband's motivations. His behavior had grown more worrying of late. He was usually the last person to leave the office at regular hours, and he frequently didn't get home until the following day. He was obviously irritated by my presence as he watched TV and drank on the rare occasions he was at home. I came home earlier than normal one day. "You're going home early today," he said unwillingly. He grudgingly acknowledged, "Yeah, finished my work early too," and excused himself to use the restroom. His phone rang from the table as I started to arrange the items, showing Ashley's name. The phone rang again after the call ended, and I saw David come out of the restroom, grab his phone, and give me a terrible look. "Avoid handling my phone. Have you never heard of privacy?" he yelled, turning to go back to his room. That's when I heard him start laughing real loud about the noisy woman at home, and said he wanted to get rid of me so he could be with Ashley. When I unintentionally came across proof of his affair, I wasn't sure what to do. After giving it some thought, I knocked on his room door and suggested we get together as I also wanted to talk to Ashley. He was still on the phone, excitedly setting up a meeting with Ashley. No amount of begging would change his mind. He was set on divorcing me and marrying Ashley. Ashley came over the weekend and smirked when she took in her surroundings. "So, I take that this was your nest of love." "Well, that was up till now," she said, sounding as though the divorce was finalized. At the table, I was serving her coffee when David immediately produced the divorce papers and told me to sign them. Ashley gave me a victorious expression, clearly pleased that my husband had picked him over me. "Hey, old lady, hurry up and sign the divorce papers, will you?" she yelled. I signed the paperwork, disgusted with Ashley and my husband alike. After that day, David never longer returned home. I got an email from Ashley shortly after that. "We unexpectedly got married. I am carrying David's child. I'm a celebrity wife from tonight on," she exclaimed, laughing raucously. "You're so angry that your speech is distorted." "Naturally, former president's wife, you got divorced from a man who made $1 million a year, and now your future appears to be very uncertain." I could cry. "It's that sad. Should I offer you a small donation?" she jeered after a greedy motive. "Otherwise, a young woman like her wouldn't get involved with a man like him who has no particular charm or looks." "You appear to be in error." "Oh, you know, I have $1 million in income every year." "He was only a board member acting all crucial and the spouse of the president, but forget about being a celebrity wife. He'll be kicked off the board now that we're divorced," I answered. "You better brace yourself." Ashley grew quiet on the phone and then yelled back at me, calling me a liar. David hung up and then called. He insisted, "What did you say to Ash?" Ashley apparently confronted David over it since she believed that I was the president. I told him the reality, told him that when he was no longer on the board, his pay would drastically decrease and that living the life of a celebrity was not an option. David was just made more enraged by my response, but I couldn't help but believe that it was appropriate. He was the one lying. After all, I hung up after telling him I will be requesting payment. The following day, obviously still furious and obliging to the workers' gaze, David and Ashley barged into the business. Ashley ran up to me and said, "My husband is going to be president going forward. You must depart now." She felt they could get herself $1 million salary if they made David president instead of me. David did the same, boasting with confidence that he was more popular and skilled than me, and that the staff would prefer him. The only reason the staff put up with my husband's bravado was because he was the president's spouse. He rarely worked, frequently took time off, and finally they caught him having an affair with a college student, for which they gave him icy looks. Who would want to ascend to the top of the organization by following such a man? My spouse persisted in berating me, oblivious to the disdainful looks from the staff, as Ashley, growing increasingly irrational, cried out for him to seize control of the business immediately. They persisted even though I had hoped the divorce would finally get rid of them, but I had an obligation to safeguard the business and its employees as president. "You two must both settle down," I interrupted, saying, "It's not appropriate for adults to be yelling like this," and it appears that Ashley misinterpreted. "The president is not my spouse," Ashley pushed back, saying, I don't care about that," with aggressiveness. "Simply end the business." Ashley was about to approach me in person and would not back down, but an employee intervened to stop her. "It's time to stop. We'll contact the cops if you don't stop doing this," the staff member said. Others intervened to assist me, led by this employee. "You will not be pardoned for anything you do against our president," they said. "Get out. You're a nuisance." The staff's firm position forced Ashley to back off. The staff had been shy around David before our divorce, but that all changed the instant we filed for divorce. This seemed to astonish him. Well, they had only been enduring it because he was my husband, I thought. Had I simply resigned to the situation, saying, "That's just the kind of husband he is," and given up on solving the problem, they wouldn't have supported me as much as they do now. "How are you all doing? Stay away from me. The president's wife is me," Ashley said. "You know I'll have you all fired. Changing the president overnight is not possible." I responded coolly, "And even if you were the president's wife, you wouldn't have the power to manage workers like that." I said this, but Ashley wouldn't stop screaming. David, meanwhile, was left speechless and visibly moved by the scorn of the staff. She was so overcome by Ashley's outburst that she continued to criticize people, thinking that her ideal future was vanishing. Disregarding the dumbfounded David, Ashley bounded from the group. David looked at me and, upon noticing my dismissive motion, quickly followed her after chasing away the unruly pair. I expressed my regret to every worker personally. After that, things went south in David and Ashley's relationship, involving a child. There were a lot of heated arguments because Ashley requested a divorce, but David refused. Ashley became scared when she realized I was still the president, and their arguments escalated into threats of legal action. To be honest, I wasn't worried about their arguments or the possibility of ugly legal cases. I'm only going to demand compensation from them. I made a decision. It is completely absurd to think that all they did to me could simply be forgotten and erased. I immediately requested payment. However, the pair, consumed by their personal matters, became enraged and demanded payment from me. "It's all your fault at this moment. You're at fault," my nonsensical husband said. It sounded to me like the dejected cry of an exhausted dog following legal action. David promptly consented to pay the settlement. When faced with legal action, his tough facade fell apart, exposing his actual fear. Following a protracted back and forth on whether or not to file for divorce, David and Ashley eventually did so. The next bit is both funny and unimportant. As it happens, Ashley's child was not actually David's. Retracing Ashley's pregnancy from the delivery, it appears that she was expecting before she met David, and the identity of the true father remains unclear. Ashley appeared to have intended to use the kid claim as leverage in the divorce process to get child support. When David and Ashley found out, things became even more complicated. It may seem obvious, but David had firmly felt that the child was his. Given that the child wasn't his and their marriage wasn't that lengthy, Ashley had hoped to at least collect child support from David, but that wasn't possible. Ashley had no choice but to go back to her strict parents' house, where they warned her to leave and never return after knowing of everything. She begged them to stay for the sake of the child, but they reluctantly consented, intending to start over with no intention of earning back their confidence. Considering all Ashley had done to me, the forgiveness extended to her seems too light. Given her apparent lack of genuine contrition, leaving her to her own devices may encourage her to engage in more extreme behavior. Living under her strict parents' roof would be a good thing, but it's unlikely that her character will change much, which seems like just deserts in an uncertain existence filled with sorrow. Attempting to entice David with the promise of an opulent lifestyle and asserting that the child was hers, she ultimately experienced this absurd result. My spouse may have moved in with Ashley after the divorce, choosing a luxurious apartment that was well beyond their means and making it impossible for him to pay the rent while having an affair with Ashley. He gave the impression that he had spent a lot of money on her, showing off his affluence by dressing elegantly and traveling in fancy vehicles. It turns out, nonetheless, that this money was obtained by loan from financial institutions. In addition, he borrowed money from high-interest lenders, which resulted in mounting debt. He became even more indebted when a lawyer told him to compensate me right away, but he was unable to come up with the money. David, who could hardly do simple chores, was harassed by debt repayments and was unable to leave his job. Even though he was causing a lot of issues, he was treated more and more badly at the company and eventually resigned. David lost everything: his wife, his career, and his house. I laughed aloud when I learned that he was homeless and opened a beer can in his now calm home without following anyone's instructions. It makes sense that thinking about David's predicament made him chuckle even more. The nicest thing was receiving the payment from David because I had savings, a profitable business, and no financial concerns. Shivers go down my spine when I think of the version of myself that would have imagined living with a man like that. When I finished my beer, I noticed that all of my aches and weariness had subsided along with David's worry. Now that I'm working more freely and joyfully, so are the employees. In order to grow the business even more, my devoted and helpful team and I started a new project. I am now looking forward to the productive days ahead. Above is today's story. If you like it, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. See you next time.